in San Antonio.
Yeah. It's an interesting situation. As far as our trade candidate is concerned, Andrew WIggins is our trade candidate for today. His nickname's Maple Jordan, Junior Jordan, the prospect, Mr. Fantastic, Wiggs, two-way Wiggs, and Air Canada.
Air Canada had a lot of potential.
That should have been it.
Air Canada had so much potential.
6'7", okay? He was drafted, as everybody knows, first overall to the Cavs, then promptly traded as LeBron was creating his big three. He's been in the league for 10 years. He won a championship with the Golden State Warriors. That is where he got his most recent contract. And at the time, a lot of people thought it was a bargain because, wow, did Andrew Wiggins finally find his role as a third scoring option, maybe sometimes, and on some days a second, and that lockdown defender. He shut down Jason Tatum in the finals. I do find it very interesting that these defenders just spawn in the playoffs. Right now, all of a sudden, Andrew Nembhard we've never seen any defense the whole season.
I don't know. Whitey Gleason was on that Andrew Nembhard before.
Whitey was, but it just feels like these playoff. I guess what I'm learning is that these playoff situations, if you have one guy that just is willing to just dig in, I feel like every team actually has an elite defender. It's just a matter of, do you get to the playoffs and do you have enough offense around them? Just one. I'm not saying a lot because they do have Nesmith too, but now they're not even putting Nesmith on Shea. They're putting Nembhard on Shea.
I don't know. They put Nesmith on Shea in Game 4 because that's why Nesmith fouled out, right? Because once Scott Foster started getting the whistle a little loose, Nesmith fouled out trying to guard Shea. But they're kind of. I think it's interesting that Oklahoma City has decided we're just putting Lou Dort on Tyrese Halliburton. The Pacers kind of, like you said, are alternating back and forth. I'm also always hesitant to just immediately give that credit because this happens every year where you watch a team play deep into the playoffs and you're watching them play 12, 15 times in a row and you start to kind of overvalue what those players are just because you're watching them so much. But the one I always think of that I made the mistake for is I thought Grant Williams was amazing.
Right.
I was just watching the Celtics in the playoffs every year. I thought Grant Williams was like this amazing basketball player changing the fortunes. And no, he's just another dude. Nembhard might just be another dude. Maybe every team has a Nembhard, to your point.
Yeah, and Andrew Wiggins was that guy. He was that guy for the Warriors. We thought maybe he had unlocked something. And then the next season, he gets paid. Something's kind of happened with his family. He missed some games and eventually gets traded to Miami, where I think Miami might have beat the Warriors, and he had a couple moments, but we haven't seen it. I just want to go back and look at Andrew Wiggins. So for his career, he's at 18.5 points per game in his career.
I don't know. He was playing a lot of bad Timberwolves
in his career. This season in 60 games, he averaged 18, 4.5 rebounds, and 2.6 assists on 44% from the field, 37% from three, 76% from the free throw line. That season, his lone all-star season, funny enough, he averaged more. He was at 17.2, so below his career average. He was at 17.2 points per game, and I get it, fan votes and things like that when you're on the Warriors, but he played in 73 games, okay? He averaged 17.2 points per game, 4.5 rebounds per game. He's a shady good rebounder, 2.2 assists, and again, he's guarding your other team's best player from three-point range. He shot it at 39% from three that season. That season was so random. He's at 35% for his career. He shot it at 39% he just put on a Warrior jersey and you can shoot threes. Andrew Wiggins he gets to Golden State and he's shooting it at 33%. That next season, 2020 and 2021, immediately shoots up to 38%.
Yep.
Next season, 39%. Next season, 39%. he that 2023, 2024, he's at 35%. And then after that, when he goes to, obviously he just went to Miami. In Miami, yeah, he gets to 37, but half of that was with the Warriors. So I don't know what to make of it. I think that Andrew WIggins, I've been on record, and I know it's kind of how many, like I said, he got bad PR. That's how I teased it. But first team all bad PR in the NBA. Andrew WIggins, I'm not counting Ben Simmons because he's not good at basketball anymore. But Andrew WIggins, Karl Anthony Towns, and some of that is what he's getting paid. But there are more players on that list. But Andrew WIggins is first team. Jordan Poole, I think, is first team all. Funny enough, they're really close friends. At least they were when they were both on the Warriors.
Well, funny enough, who are the first two names you mentioned there? Andrew WIggins and Karl.
Yeah.
Wonder why. They've never been able to shake the Jimmy Butler practice thing.
That's right. And then he gets traded for Jimmy. He just all connected to Jimmy.
Yeah, he's never been able to shake the fact that Jimmy Butler called him a you-know-what and was kind of right.
So it's interesting stuff. To me, I would look at it. I would put this in the category of if you got to do something, do it. But now, as Kyle, we'll get into the different trade conversations. And now I'm feeling like what you have cooked up, that's not enough for DeMar DeRozan. It's not enough based on Desmond Bane going for 8,000 first-round picks. I'm going to need more. So let's just do it right now, Kyle. Give us, you have three. It looks like you have three of them.
Yeah, I could have done more. Funny enough, I'm not saying that they're specifically going to make these trades. I know you guys did Jaime Jaquez last week as a trade candidate while I was gone, but Miami is actually surprisingly easy to make trades with. Like, I think that we talked before about how the only team I can definitively say is in a worse situation than the Kings is the Heat. But in a weird way, the Heat and the Kings have a lot of easy pieces and different avenues to make trades. So honestly, I don't even know if it's going to be a Wiggins for DeRozan, which is the first one we have here. Heat get DeMar DeRozan, Kings get Andrew Wiggins and Haywood Highsmith, who has 1 year left.
I need more.
Why wouldn't the Heat come back and say the same thing about Andrew Wiggins and say, based on what Desmond Bane just went for, Andrew Wiggins on an expiring contract is worth X, Y, or Z? Since you're singing the praises of his 36% three-point shooting on the Miami Heat, which is literally average.
Then keep them if you're Miami. They're the ones that are they're the ones that are, quote unquote, trying to upgrade, I guess.
I think it's more so just fitting what their needs are, right? They kind of need a score first. I'm not saying a mid-range player because everyone could use someone who's great in the mid-range, but they kind of just need a score-first ball-handling wing to go along with Tyler Hero, their de facto point guard, and Bam Adebayo, their starting center. I think there's so much interest around Andrew Wiggins. One, and I brought this up before when we've talked about Wiggins, is when he first got to Minnesota, and you were talking about his point average earlier, right, of 18. I'm like, brother, he scored 23.5 points per game on a Timberwolves team that won 30 games. That's probably bumping up that average a little bit. But the underlying point is that Timberwolves team had him and Zach LaVine as the rookies and sophomores for 2 seasons before they traded for Jimmy Butler. They were the same rookie class. They apparently had a really good relationship, and based on a little bit of sourcing, they kind of want to play with each other again at some point in their career. So maybe trading for Andrew Wiggins has some benefits that we're not seeing right now. The fact that him and Zach LaVine really like each other, and him and Zach LaVine might both be better versions of themselves playing alongside each other. Maybe that's a pro for Andrew Wiggins. Maybe it isn't. But I think regardless of how they go into the trade for DeRozan, I just think it's less about what each is bringing to the table and more so just reshuffling the cards to make each team feel a little bit better about what they have.
28.2 million, what Andrew Wiggins is owed. Okay, then there's a player option for $30.1 million, and then he'd be an unrestricted free agent. So you're basically just swapping out what DeMar DeRozan is, and you're getting Andrew WIggins. I think it would help the defensive end. Offensively, like I said, he can shoot the three ball. He can space the floor much better than DeMar DeRozan. He's not going to give you, 30 when you need it, or maybe he will on certain nights, but not as often as DeMar DeRozan kind of bailed out. DeMar DeRozan taking the last shot and Andrew WIggins taking the last shot. That's just not a conversation we're going to have. But I like the idea of it. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I like it because he does a ton of stuff that the Kings need right now. He spaces the floor. It's not a crazy contract, and you could still go out. And if you go it's in the same vein. If you're asking me would I rather have Andrew WIggins or PJ Washington, I'd probably say PJ Washington. He's a little bit cheaper and things like that. But you go get Andrew WIggins, again, for this kind of mid-tier QB conversation that all these NBA teams are just want to be a part of. You go get Andrew WIggins and Kobe White, maybe, something like that. And I think I feel better about them getting that six. You're in that group that was waiting for the last game of the season. You're in that group from this past season.
It feels like you're reshuffling, right? As I said earlier, the Kings get WIggins, little lengthier, little bit more defense. Miami gets DeRozan, playmaking, offensive ability. They can play Tyler Hero, DeRozan, and Bam together at the same time and feel better. Like, Miami needs offense, the Kings need defense. Let me just, instead of doing all the breakdown there, Kings need some defense, Miami needs some offense. I think Miami was dead last in offense after trading Jimmy Butler. So maybe this trade just is everyone saying, let's just stand pat, wait for those contracts to expire, and in 2026, we're going to make some big moves. The second deal that I have here is kind of similar, but just with Malik Monk instead, which I would imagine if they did that, the Kings would want to extend Andrew WIggins, unless they're trading Monk and saying we're going to have $50 million in cap space next summer, which I don't see the Kings doing that. But it's basically WIggins for Malik Monk and Terrence Davis. And you have to include Terrence Davis for salary cap reasons.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think to me, so do you move DeRozan to the bench?
Maybe you still move DeRozan for a point guard.
Right, but I guess this would just be one move. Well, you'd have to, right? Or if we're assuming this is the only, sometimes I think of these deals as this is the only deal that the Kings are going to make. Yeah. I think that's a cleaner way to do it. And if this is the deal, the only deal or the deal that the Kings make, I would think about bringing DeMar DeRozan off the bench. Well, I would.
Because then you would have Keon Ellis, Zach LaVine, WIggins. Oh, there's no playmaking there. I guess you'd have to bring in a point guard no matter what. But you would have Keon, LaVine, WIggins as your starting backcourt.
Yeah, I'm okay with
front court.
I'm okay with adding in a point guard to these conversations. It's just if we're moving Malik, I don't necessarily want to assume that we're going to move DeRozan. So whenever it's not for a point guard, let's just assume throw Tyus Jones in there. He's out there somewhere.
Tyus Jones, Keon, Zach LaVine, WIggins, Keegan Murray, Sabonis. Again, Tyus Jones would start, but he wouldn't close. And then, I guess you would have to have DeRozan coming off the bench in that situation. It's either him or Keon, which I guess you can make the argument with Wiggins and Keegan. Maybe you can afford to put Keon coming off the bench. Yeah, but it's got to be either Keon or DeRozan in that situation.
Man, oh man. Okay, I don't think I'm doing that deal, to be honest with you. I'm not doing it.
I think Miami probably would rather do the DeRozan one instead.
I agree.
Which, by the way, just to do the same experiment for that one, it would leave the Kings with Tyus Jones, again, pick a point guard, Keon Ellis, Zach LaVine, Andrew WIggins, Keegan Murray, Domantas Sabonis, and then coming off the bench, Malik Monk, Haywood Highsmith, Jonas Valanciunas, and Devin Carter.
But I thought Malik was in this deal.
No, that was the DeRozan one.
Okay.
The second one is the same, but just flip DeRozan for Malik, essentially. So make DeRozan your sixth man instead of Malik your sixth man.
Yeah, I'm not doing trade number 2. What does trade number 3 look like?
Trade number 3 is dumping Zach LaVine's contract for a bunch of expiring deals, which many Kings fans would say they would want to do that. Just dump Zach LaVine. We get an expiring contract. We'll do something next year. So that one would be Zach LaVine for Andrew WIggins, Kyle Anderson, and the expiring Duncan Robinson, $18 million.
The only thing I'll say here is, we're talking a lot about DeMar DeRozan and how his value to me shot up after that insane Desmond Bane trade. You could have that conversation about Zach LaVine. I know he's still making a ton of money, but it's worth having the same Kevin Durant. You didn't get Kevin Durant. Can I interest you in a Zach LaVine convo? Maybe Miami is interested in something like that. When you're Miami and it feels like, these strong cultures, it feels like you could get anybody and it'll work out. Not that the Andrew WIggins thing didn't really work out because I think they were never planning on sticking with that crew because that crew isn't doing anything. But I could see Miami convincing themselves that, hey, if we get our hands on a Zach LaVine, you'd have Zach LaVine at the 2, Tyler Hero.
Are you starting Davion, or is Davion coming off the bench?
Well, Tyler Hero, obviously they didn't have Davion for much of the season, but Tyler Hero was essentially their point guard.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to then, are they starting Davion or are they starting Jovic?
Yeah, which that's problems for them to figure out.
Doesn't matter that much.
Right. My larger point is just having Zach LaVine who can be more of a 2. It doesn't have to do any type of playmaking because they feel like Tyler Hero can be that guy. At least they've thought it the last couple years here. I think you have something. It's Zach LaVine, Tyler Hero, Bam.
Khalil Ware,
his second year. I think it's at least intriguing. So the Kings would get Andrew WIggins, Kyle Anderson, and Duncan Robinson. I mean, obviously, well, actually, I shouldn't say obviously. A lot of people would do that deal. I don't know if the most important person when it comes to the Kings organization would do that deal because I don't know if that person wants to move off of Zach LaVine. But I think a lot of people would do that deal.
What's super fun about the Miami of it all is that they still have Terry Rozier's contract. They still have another one that I can't think of right now. So they've got a lot of ways to make these deals work. Like there's so many different avenues for the Kings and Heat to make a trade that I kind of feel like it might be, again, both teams are kind of like in that we're always in the play-in territory right now, but there's honestly a lot of different ways they could get a deal done with the Miami Heat, and it might be beneficial to both sides because Miami's offense was terrible last year, and the Kings' defense was pretty terrible last year. Yeah. So maybe there's a pretty good path to a deal, whether it's LaVine, DeRozan, Monk, someone else, whether it's Andrew WIggins, Jaime Jaquez, or Kyle Anderson or Duncan Robinson. Like there's a lot of different ways these teams can make a trade happen with each other because they have a lot of expensive expiring contracts.
Yeah, interesting kind of propositions here. I would do 2 of those. I wouldn't move off of Malik Monk. I just think that you would be fixing an issue. That's the move where you would be fixing an issue but creating another one because I don't think the Kings would have enough scoring on that team. You could make that argument with Zach LaVine. Would the Kings have enough scoring if they moved on from Zach LaVine? If you do add Andrew WIggins, Duncan Robinson, and Kyle Anderson, and then, like we said, throw in whatever one of these point guards that we keep bringing up, these kind of tier 2-ish point guards. I think it's interesting. I would love to add Andrew WIggins to the team, and you're just hoping that maybe you get, again, these teams that are just saying maybe a bunch of stuff happens all at once, right? Similar to the Beam Team season, and we just get hot and go on a run.
Well, and here's the benefit of the Zach LaVine move, which is going into 2026, the Kings would have $60 million in cap space because you would have DeRozan's contract basically expiring. There's a non-guaranteed year after that. Wiggins' contract expires. Duncan Robinson's contract expires. you would have approximately $60 million to work with in free cap space. So if next year's Kuminga, I don't know who it would be, Jabari Smith Jr. or Sohan, if next year's Jonathan Kuminga doesn't re-sign with their team as a restricted free agent, Kings have a boatload of cap space to tell that person, hey, we'll pay you $20 million to come to Sacramento. And maybe that's their path to getting younger, is by just swallowing their pride for a season, playing it out with Wiggins and Duncan Robinson and DeMar DeRozan and seeing how far you can get, and then either bringing some of those guys back at lesser numbers or just moving on from everybody and bringing in someone new.
Andrew Wiggins in that starting lineup, you would move off of DeMar DeRozan. You'd get Haywood, Highsmith, which would add some pop off the bench and, add a little bit of length as well. I would for sure do that deal. And the other thing is, too, just as you look at kind of the sizes and things, Haywood Highsmith, I mean, he goes 6'5", right? So I know that could mean a lot these days. That could be a point guard, a shooting guard, or small forward, anything like that. But you do get a little bit of length. He can play the forward position. So you get a little bit of length there. Obviously, you get Andrew Wiggins. You're fixing your wing. I think your wing conversation, and honestly, in that deal, I would wonder, is Jake LaRavia part of that deal, or not a part of that deal, but is Jake LaRavia coming back or not? Because I don't even know if you necessarily need Haywood Highsmith. I'm bringing it up because maybe I would look for somebody else to add instead of Haywood Highsmith if you're getting Jake LaRavia back, because I don't know that you would need him in that same way. So a lot of things to think about. Would you do a deal? 916-339-1140. Would you do a deal for Andrew Wiggins? Any of these deals? DeMar DeRozan for Andrew Wiggins and Haywood Highsmith. Malik Monk and Terrence Davis for Andrew Wiggins. And last but not least, Andrew Wiggins, Kyle Anderson, Duncan Robinson and you would be moving off of Zach LaVine. Would you do any of these deals? 916-339-1140. When we return, what does a Desmond Bane trade mean for the Kings offseason? Alan Stiles, Sactown Sports.